Alright, so today I'm starting to build our Murphy bed. I'm just going to go with a really basic design. I've watched a bunch of different videos and kind of mashed together a whole bunch of different ideas. I'm just going for something really simple. We want a couch underneath it, so when it's folded up there's still a place to sit, since we're living in a really small space and don't want to have both a seating area or a sofa and a bed. So we're going to try and combine those two. Murphy bed will lay down on top of the couch when it's closed, and then it'll fold up against the wall and be the back of the couch is the idea. Haven't seen a whole lot of designs for that other than like specialty builds that are really expensive. So I'm just gonna go really simple, cheap materials, not even doing the Murphy bed hardware. I'm just using some Lazy Susan bearings, and we're going to see how it turns out. So I'm going to start by building the frame for the bed, and then everything else will kind of go around it. I've kind of done some calculations, but I'm not an engineer, so there's still a few, like the hinge points and stuff, I'm still going to have to figure that out. So I'm going to start with the frame of the bed and go from there and build everything else around it. So I'm going to start here by ripping the plywood for the base of the bed, which is what will hold the mattress. And I'm using 3/4 inch CDX plywood, which of course is actually 23/32. A sheet of plywood isn't wide enough to make the bottom of the frame out of a single piece, so I'm going to rip 2 pieces and put them together. I'm building the bed for a double mattress, which is 54 inches wide by 75 inches long. So that needs to be the total inside measurements of the frame that I'm building. I'm cutting my first 2 pieces at 27 by 75. And then I'll build a frame around those. And this is what will hold the mattress, and will also be the fastening point for the Lazy Susan bearings. The bearings I was able to get are 6 inches square, so I'm going to go ahead and rip the sides at 6.5 inches. I'm going to cut my long side pieces at 75 inches to match the bottom, and then the shorter sides will be cut to 55 and 7/16 to cover the extra plywood on the sides. There are certainly better ways to fasten everything together. I don't have the fancy tools, and I'm just trying to do this as quick and as cheap as possible. So I'm just pre-drilling and then screwing everything together. Of course, with plywood, absolutely make sure that you pre-drill for your screws, because otherwise you might end up splitting stuff out, and that's just going to cause problems and you'll lose structural stability. Just something to keep in mind as you are assembling everything. Try to remember what's going to appear. If you're using a finished plywood, then of course make sure the appearance side is out where it's going to be seen. Your mattress will cover everything else. Even if you are using CDX though, like me, pay attention to the better side and choose what you want to be seen versus what is hidden. Okay, so then I just ripped one of my extra scraps. I just ripped into 5 pieces that I'm just going to space evenly around here just to help hold everything together. It would be nice to use a higher quality plywood like a birch or something that's a finished grade, but these are post-COVID lumber prices, so I'm just building this the cheapest that I can. Which of course CDX plywood, and that's still over $60 a sheet here. I ended up using 3 sheets for this build. I've got this red mahogany stain. Go ahead and slap on there. I'm just gonna brush it on. Alright, that's all I'm going to do on this for now. Of course, later we're going to install the wheel bearings here for the hinge point, and I'll also put a support legs shelf here that'll flip out when the bed goes down for some extra support. And then we'll also have a fastening mechanism so that I can slide a bolt in and lock the bed in place when it's up. So we'll get to all that later, but I want to move on and start building the bench couch seat so that I can kind of start to see how everything else fits together, and then we'll make these modifications to the bed frame as we go. So next step is the sofa couch frame. Kind of for tiny home stuff, I really like 2x3s. They're just a little bit lighter and smaller than 2x4s. Home Depot sells them, they're a little bit cheaper, and they're just better for smaller spaces when you really don't need quite the beefiness of a 2x4. So I use 2x3s a lot. They're going to work really well for this, I think. So that's what I do. I'm starting with the ends of the couch, which will also be armrests. So I'm just going to build 2 frame squares out of 2x3s. I'm making the couch 15 inches high, and I want the armrests to be about 7 inches higher than the seat, depending on the cushion and the trim. So I'm going to go ahead and make these end frame squares 22 inches high by 28 inches long. Alright, so I've got my armrests and side supports for the couch. So now I'm going to build the bench seat, which will set in between those rests. And so there's a couple things to account for with that. Obviously we're going the width of the bed frame, plus the bearings, which add 3/8, so for each one, so 3/4, that adds a 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to have my side supports, which are going to be made out of 3/4 plywood that the bed folds up into. Those are going to be inside between the armrests as well. So that'll add another 1 3/8 inches. So I'm going to add 2 1/8 inches onto my width of my bed frame, which is the 55 7/16. So the top of my bench is going to be 57 9/16, and then I'm going to go ahead and make it 24 inches wide. Okay, so here's the start to the frame for the sofa, and just to kind of explain, I'm going to put some more supports underneath, but just to kind of explain what's going on here. So the frame for the rest of the bed will be, I'll rip it out of plywood. This is 9 inches, and it'll go down there, fastened to this, and then the Lazy Susan bearings will mount onto that. So the reason for this gap here is, since the bed's gonna hinge right here, it'll come down and rest on top of the bench, but it's gonna hinge here, so it needs some space to flip back in, and it'll be like centered here, so there'll be a gap behind it to give it room, and then of course this whole gap to give it room to rotate down in there. So it should be 90 degrees with the top of this when it's up, and when it comes down, it'll set down and sit on top of the sofa, is the thought. So I've got a bit of leftover old lumber from an old cabin I tore down that I've used a bit inside the house, and so I'm going to use some of that kind of to finish out some of these places rather than buying more plywood. So do the bench top with this and probably some of the trim and stuff. You could also just use plywood again. That'd be an easy way to go. Since this is old rough cut, I'm just knocking off some of the edges and getting rid of some of the dirt because it's been sitting around for a long time too. Okay, so for the trim pieces, I'm going to go ahead and use a finish nailer to shoot those in. So pretty much anything non-structural at this point, I'm just going to shoot in with finish nails. I'm just using leftover scraps of plywood that I had from the frame for the inside and outside of the couch here. You could use any scrap wood that you have. Then I'm going to put a coat of stain on the plywood before I coat everything with polyurethane. Again, I'm just using old scraps of wood that I had for the trim. For the armrest tops and fronts, I'm just cutting these at a 45-degree angle and then trimming to get around the seat and to leave space for the wall frame supports to fit inside. Alright, so I think the couch bench is finished, except for a coat of finish, polyurethane or something. So I kind of just have the plywood accents stained. Didn't have enough stain to do everything, and I really like the kind of old barnwood look anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that. So then next I'm going to rip the frame for the bed to fold up into, and that of course is going to go in the sides there, fasten in. Okay, so as I'm calculating the height for my side supports for the bed frame, you gotta remember to allow for the hinge, it needs some space to fold up into. So the very top can't be exactly flush with the top of where the bed is gonna sit when it's finished. The hinge point is in the middle of my bed frame. I'm gonna go ahead and add 1/2 inch. If that's not enough, I may have to raise a little bit more. So my bed is 76 3/8. I'm going to go 77 for my supports, plus the 15 extra to sit down inside the sofa frame. I should mention here that I built my couch for the wall frame to be 9 inches deep, which is what I'm ripping this plywood to, but I forgot the thickness of our mattress. As I was building, I just assumed it was 6 inches since that's the depth of the bottom frame that I made. And so if your mattress is 6 inches, then a 9-inch wall frame is going to be plenty. But you'll see I had to make some modifications later and ended up making this wall frame 12 inches deep to accommodate our 10-inch mattress. Okay, I'm down to my last bigger piece of plywood. I'm going to go ahead and cut out my shelf, which will be the support for the base of the bed. So I'm going to go ahead and make that 36 inches wide. And then I'm going to rip the other one down for cross supports in the back of the frame. Here I'm just adding some scrap 2x to my folding support to give it more strength for holding the bed when it's down.
Yeah, living in a tiny house, sometimes building large projects can be difficult, because I also don't have a huge shop. Okay, all those boards are in. I believe I'm ready to start painting and getting a coat of polyurethane on all this.
If you're going to be moving this into your house soon, I would suggest using a water-based polyurethane. I feel like that takes a little less time for the odors to go away if it's water-based rather than oil. But either way, plan on giving it some time for the odors to go away, or definitely keep your room aired out after you've applied the varnish.
New day, new haircut. I've been asking Leslie for a while to let me cut my hair, and I had a 10K raise this morning, so in preparation for that she finally said okay, you can cut it, after we got some maternity photos. So anyway, today I am gonna, since everything's stained and painted, I'm gonna work on installing hardware and try and get this bed installed, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so you may need to modify your whatever bearing you end up using. You got to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and use bolts just for a little stability, so you just need to make sure your bolts aren't going to hit each other, so they need to be offset a little bit. So I'm having to drill these holes a little bit wider to fit and to put them where I want. Okay, so I had these leftover locking hinges from building our folding table, and they're really nice. They're like spring loaded. They go down when they are up in place, then they lock. So they're really good for this kind of stuff. You can get them cheap on Amazon or other places, I'm sure. Okay, and then I'm going to center it on my second to top support, or cross brace. So I ran out of stain, which is why this is painted green. It's the same paint as the wall. So
so hopefully it doesn't look too bad. Okay, so next I'm gonna get the back frame fastened where it needs to be so that I can adjust this closer to where it needs to be. I have the bench pulled out right now so that I have access to the other side of the wheel bearings. And that's going to be a little complicated to reach where I need to get them fastened, but we'll get there when we get there. First step is to get this back locked in where I want it. Okay, so on these bearings, trying to figure out how to make the bed flush when it's folded in without having to do that right now. I've just measured, since this is going to be the face of the bed, measured from here to the back of the bearing, which is the top right now. So that's 6 1/4 inches. And then I've measured from in here, the back of this bearing is flush with the inside corner here. So then I've measured out 6 1/4 to here. So this should be, if I move this back up to here, this should be our flush line. We can do the same over on the other side and get this leveled and ready to go. Okay, so for now I'm just going to put this in with some screws just to try and make sure I get it where it needs to be and that everything works. And yeah, I'm going to have to put these in at an offset angle, just because that's the only way I can get access to them. And then I'll probably have to cut off this one tab. So now for the moment of truth, I'm going to try and lift it up and fold it in, and we'll see if it gets stuck somewhere and doesn't fit. For starters, that's not too bad. Okay, so I need to do a little adjustment here. You can see there's more of a gap on the left side than on the right, and the reason for that is because I was just kind of eyeballing with the level on this, but this end is a little higher. So I think I'm actually going to try and raise this end up to meet it. It needs to come up like 3/8 of an inch, I believe. And that should fix that issue. Alright, take 2. Sweet. Okay, I'm happy with how that is. So now I'm going to go ahead and try and swap these screws for bolts. So you can see, since I've had to turn this Lazy Susan on its side just to make it where I could get at it in an easy way. So I've got this little extra piece. I'm just going to cut that off. If I can, I'm going to try and get a 3rd bolt on the other side in there. But honestly, the 2 is probably good enough. We'll see. Okay, before I get to the exciting part of putting the bench back in, which is going to be a little interesting, I'm going to go ahead and put in my fasteners for this couch. So I'm going to drill a temporary screw in just to hold this in place where I'm going to want these pins. So I don't want them too high, I want them to be comfortable to get.
just go there. And then just ensuring I'm nice and flush. Okay, so to fasten it, I'm just going to use threaded eye bolts on each side, and they'll go through, and then there'll be a T-nut on the inside of the bed frame that this will go in to connect to. Pump this up to the size for the T-nut. I'm just going to go ahead and put some epoxy on this for a little extra oomph. Okay, it's not super pretty, but I've just kind of drilled out slots for the little bolt there to go through, and I've just bent these tabs back. They're going to be covered up with cushions, so they'll be fine. So we'll see if this fits now. Okay, so last thing is just kind of finishing fastening everything together. I'm going to drop the bed down and fasten the bench. Probably put a few more screws in the back frame. Call it good. Okay, so I completely spaced on the thickness of our mattress. I don't know why. I just built the whole design without even thinking again, second thought about how thick the mattress was. I had it in my mind, I guess, that 6 inches is what I was building it to. Anyway, so obviously that didn't fit. So what I've done is I just added another strip behind here for an extra 3 inches and strapped that in there. You can see my straps there with screws. And added that. It's not bearing any weight, so it's not very structural. It's mostly just to hide the bed when it goes up. So that worked okay, and kind of got a little two-tone look going on the outside there now. So it works okay. And our mattress is 10 inches thick, so this comes out to 12 inches away from the wall. And that works pretty good when we just have sheets and a light blanket on there. If you had heavier bedding, then you'd probably want to go a little thicker if you want to fold those up into the wall. But for a 10-inch mattress, sheets, thin blanket, 12 inches for the back frame works good. Alright, well, we've been using the Murphy bed and couch for a little while now. It's working pretty good. Yeah, no major flaws that we've found yet. We're still in the process of cushions. We got the foam the other day, and so I've just cut it to fit, and then we'll find some fabric and upholster it. But basically just the bottom is a piece, and then we've got the back cushion here, so those just come off when the bed comes down at night, and then you just set them back on when the bed goes up, and it's pretty nice, pretty comfortable. So not too bad for a really simple, easy
build. You could make it a lot nicer if you wanted to. I mean, you could do the hardware if you wanted it easier to lift up in. I don't think it's too bad to lift up the way it is. It is pretty heavy, so for some people that could be an issue. But if it was in a spare bedroom or something where you're only setting it down every once in a while, it wouldn't be that bad. And even for us, I don't mind lifting it. It's not that bad. All in all, it worked out for us. It's a good addition to our tiny home, and definitely makes this small room feel a lot bigger. It's nice to be able to have the extra floor space during the day. If you want to see more of our tiny house, follow along our channel. We'll be posting a house tour here pretty soon. We live in about 270 square feet. We have twins on the way, so every bit of square space matters, and a Murphy bed was pretty high on the list to get done before the twins arrive. Hopefully this video helps somebody else who's looking to do a similar project. I definitely watched a lot of videos before doing this and kind of stole a bunch of ideas and put them all together, but it turned out okay. It's not too complicated. Don't be afraid of people who say, oh, Murphy beds are so challenging. They're not. It's not that difficult. Just think through your process, measure your mattress before you start, and you'll be good to go.